Can you hear us now? Is that better? Let me know, B.
Oh, nice.
Becker, can you hear us okay? Because if Becker can hear us, then we're all good. So if you're just hearing us for the first time, hi, I'm...
Welcome again. Welcome again.
My name is Dane Sanders. Welcome to Fast Track Coaching. Thanks for putting up with all the technical stuff. Thanks for the help, Becker, on the technical side as usual. I'm here with my friend Joe Photo, and this is the 98th episode of Fast Track Coaching. Been doing this for almost 2 years now, and it's a big day for a lot of reasons I'll talk about in a little bit. But for me, it's just really fun to have Joe on the show. Joe's never been on the show before, which is amazing to me. But he's had a huge influence on a lot. What did you say?
Virgin. I'm a virgin on Fast Track Photographer.
He's had a lot of influence on a lot of us, and I think that it's important to, whenever we can, at least for me, I'm always surprised that I get to get into these conversations. And really, what you guys didn't get to join in on was the last hour and a half of us eating at Bear Flag and talking about life. And it's amazing to me, no matter how much I love online social media and the ability to connect and broadcast to a lot of people, I'm just always just moved by just regular human beings having conversations around real things. And today it's a significant day for me on a lot of levels. I had a chance yesterday to be on a phone call with a lot of the fast track leaders around the world, really. And we got to review a little bit about kind of what's been going on for the last couple of years. And it just seems like the other day when I wrote an email to a bunch of friends and said, hey, would you mind supporting me on this idea called Fast Track Photographer? And out of that came this book. And then it felt like a couple months later, Random House came out with this little book. And then today, you can put it down. Today, I am really excited that finally we're done with these books. But Fast Track Photographer Business Plan, brand new book, entirely new content around how to business plan as a professional photographer in any genre. That came out today, both in these versions and on Kindle. And the response you guys it's been amazing. I can't thank you enough. But really, what all this stuff does is it sets the table for more conversation. And if anything our industry needs right now is thoughtful, careful, honest conversation about what's really going on in the pro photography creatives. Like as pro creatives, given our industries, what are we doing and how can we help each other raise the bar for everybody, but also just find a way, viability-wise. And even beyond viability, like to thrive, to feel like we're doing what we were made to do as creative people. And so you guys are, in a sense, joining the conversation late. We've already been talking for a while, and we had a great lunch.
Awesome.
But we want to invite you to the conversation. So if you've never been a part of Fast Track Coaching before, the way it works is you simply Twitter at Dane Sanders in the Twitter, and we will see your questions, see your comments. And consistently, the folks who get the most out of this conversation are the people who
are engaged.
They're not just spectators, they're participants. So if you don't join in, no problem. I'm happy to have a conversation with Joe, but I think you'll get a lot more out of it if you do.
I want to start. I want to interview you for a second.
You don't need to do that, Joe.
Because, well, while we're on the topic of Fast Track Photographer,
yeah.
What inspired you creatively? What was the spark that led to the idea that then culminated in this first book?
Okay, so that was, I'll say it very quickly because I'm actually nice try. I'm going to switch gears back to you in a minute. But this one came out of, I woke up in the middle of the night, I was noticing, because of some really unique circumstances, I found myself in conversations with folks like yourself and Becker and Mike Cologne and David J was a huge influence on me back then, and a bunch of people, and not only locally but around the country. And I was noticing some trends of people who seemed to be flourishing and those who were suffering. And this is right on the heels of the digital revolution, and everything was shifting. And it seemed like some people had adapted and kind of exploded, whereas other folks who were really talented were stuck. And the aha that I had was, how funny. Hi, Craig Strong. Good to see you. Thanks for the text. What I noticed was the shift wasn't a lot about people's skill level. Like there's some really talented people that just were invisible in the marketplace. And it seemed a lot of it had to do with their attitude. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to figure out a way to talk about attitude in a way that was constructive, that was helpful. And I woke up in the middle of the night with this story in my head, which is chapter 1 of the book, about this guy named Frank and this girl named Beth. and I told the story out of my experience, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of folks, and that eventually led to talking beyond just the wedding photography world, but to other genres. But that's where it started, and I got to tell you, man, when I first got invited to, when I got enrolled in the idea of writing something down, at first I thought, oh, this would be really fun to write a book, and then I started writing it, and it was freaking hard work. And all of a sudden I realized like people were going to read it and maybe do something with what I said, and then I had a stake in that, like some responsibility. So I didn't want to screw around. And the more I've leaned into it, and I think this is going to be the centerpiece of our conversation, given our lunch, is the more I realized that if I committed to creating value wherever I was, that was what was going to provide not only the best resource for me, but the best resource for those I'm serving, whether it be my clients, whether it be photographers that I'm writing for, whether it be people in a workshop or whatever it is. And that hasn't changed. Like the economies have changed, the circumstances in a lot of people's lives have changed, but creativity always keeps winning. I've noticed like no matter where I look, no matter what the kind of flavor of the week is or the cool technological WYSIWYG is, whatever that is. What
trademark.
.com. But what I've noticed is consistently, people who are creative, they consistently win. And by creative, I mean not just like clever novel, but clever novel for the sake of something bigger than themselves. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, Joe, is you are somebody who, you remind me of, I always associate you with John Michael Cooper and Parker Pfister, and there's like a handful of people in our industry, especially the wedding industry, that are remarkable.
I'm happy to be in that crowd. Seriously,
well, you
Thank you.
You are, and I think, and that's clearly not just me thinking that, but I remember Becker and I were sitting at WPI one year, a couple of years back, and you and Parker had just come back from New Orleans or someplace, and you were giving a presentation from the stage, and you were showing. I remember the song you were playing, it was a Johnny Cash song. And the images were scrolling through, and I remember walking away, just my jaw on the floor, just going, "Oh my gosh, it's amazing!" And I turned to Becker, who's freaking talented already, and I said, "What was it like for you?" And he goes, "I want to throw my camera against the wall and just quit because these guys are so good." But of course, that isn't what happens. Of course, we see these things and we get inspired, and we want to go create. We want to best you or do something better. And that's what's so exciting to me is you are creative everywhere you go. Like you treat what you wear as like a palette. You treat your life and how you engage it. You treat your family and how what you come up with. And the story you told me the other day about being at the DMV and getting creative in that context, which is almost impossible. But what I'm amazed by is that you consistently do that holistically. And as we get into this conversation about creativity, I kind of want to begin it by just hearing a little. And by the way, if you guys don't know who Joe is, it's unfortunate because given that there's several hundred of you on here, I'm wrong. You already know who Joe is, so I'm going to just back up. If you don't know who Joe is, spend a little time on the interweb. You're going to find out pretty quickly. But but just don't.
Okay, we're gonna go into like all of the mistakes and stuff that I've made too creatively. And
no, don't start there. So let me ask you this. Talk about for a minute how important it is. Well, let's talk about this relative to trial and error. How important is it when it comes to creativity to get off of this idea of being perfect? Because I get a lot of conversations with people who are perfectionists, like meaning they're careful with the end result, but it doesn't serve them. Like they get stuck in that, and nothing new comes out of them. They feel kind of bland.
Like the Dead Sea.
Like the Dead Sea. So talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Well, perfectionism is a double-edged sword. I certainly embrace the idea of doing an incredibly good job with my photography, with my business, with my life, though a lot of times perfectionism holds me up from a lot of other things that I could achieve if I hadn't spent so much time trying to get something perfect. And in our heads, it's an illusion. Really, perfection, the perfect image, there is no such thing as the perfect image. It's all about how we perceive it to be. Another viewer, if you're looking at the same image, I might think I've worked on it until it's perfect.
Right.
And you may say, oh, well, I don't really care for that image. Or vice versa. And I really realized in print competition, judging other people's work, how important it is to step back and go, okay, really there is no perfect print. Though we try to quantify with a number. Well, this print scored a perfect 100. So in our head, when we're print judging, we've got to be able to give a number to a value, a perceived value that we have from all of our experiences into a print, and we project that into a print. And what I've realized is the viewer, whether it's me or whether it's you or whether it's somebody else, they're gonna approach the print with their own perceptions too. So there is no perfect print, and I would say I'm in the process of healing from that idea of perfectionism and taking more risks to just move on beyond that. Like, okay, really, do I need to work on an image for a half hour? Sometimes if it brings great joy and to me, then yes, I would say that's fine. But if it's taking away from other experiences or other business endeavors that you could be doing, what I found is spending so much time working on images, I don't then spend as much time on my business and marketing my business.
So let's talk about that, because there's a couple pieces that I'm noticing. One is what I love what you're saying about, because perfection can mean such a broad stroke thing for so many people. So if what it means is commitment and trying to get something radically good, then I love that. Okay. It's so funny. I've never been this popular in my life. And
awesome.
All of a sudden it's ringing.
You can call us.
Like nuts. But I just want to say, like, go to... we're trying to have a conversation. Not a problem. But when people say what they mean, what they mean by that word is they're committed to getting a great result, a new result, a fantastic result. I love that. That's fantastic. Where I get discouraged, both in my own life and also when I hear other people talk about it, is when what they really mean is without error or without fault, when in reality it seems like so much of great results are sometimes in the midst of making mistakes. A fantastic goof, and then all of a sudden you get I think of some of those amazing war photography images from Robert Chapman, the beginning of true photojournalism at World War II, and how much film would get caught in salt water and they pull it out and those are like the iconic images of that day.
Happy accident is what I call them.
Yeah. So in that, when we talk about there's a commitment level of it, but then there's kind of this kind of breakdown where if the goal is to have no error, or if there is an error, somehow I'm not going to put it out into the marketplace for anybody to see it, or I'm not going to ship. And what I really love what you're talking about at the end is how do we get creative around not just what we do with our camera or now with Photoshop, but how do we get creative with the whole of our business, holistically creative, so that I'm thinking creatively about, okay, we do live in a new economy. 10 years ago there wasn't digital, now there is. And now that's 10 years old news. So now where are we today that's new, that if we get set in our old ways we get stuck? And how, because it seems like consistently, Joe, you have been the king of I'm going to reinvent in a great way, in the best of creative ways. Okay. And at least that's how I view it. And to be honest, I aspire to it too. I think it seems like creatively approaching all of my life will give me more resource than looking at just one area of my life. So I'm going to shut up. I want to hear you talk a little bit.
Okay.
What's coming to mind when I say all that?
Well, I wanted to go back to, thank you for the compliment of the king of reinvention. I don't know. I certainly don't see myself in that way. I mean, I've always known that I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to make a living as an artist, and it wasn't until getting out of high school, going to college and film school, where I really honed in on photography as a career. But though I was tempted by motion pictures also, and so my degree actually is in radio, television, film from Cal State Long Beach, and I love the idea of cinematography and light. So being able to switch gears from investing a couple of years into a degree in film to changing gears to photography, they sort of go hand in hand. But I would say, I think that's the old paradigm where you're learning within a context of things that work together. They seem to fit together. You can transition from film to video to photography really well. I think to really succeed in today's business market, I think it's really important for us to meet other business owners that have totally different business models in order to be inspired to think outside of the box. Because if I spend my day just only speaking to photographers, I'm just going to hear about what other photographers, it's pretty much the same thing.
I've already done.
So it's like, so I've got friends who own businesses who, I've got a friend that I became friends with him. I shot his wedding in 2001. His name's Brian, and he's the CEO of a company that is a collection agency. Basically, his company collects on defaulted student loans. When Parker and I did our workshop in Jackson, Mississippi in the end of October, Brian came out because he now lives in Louisiana. He came out and hung out with us, and afterwards, after the class was over, the three of us sat down, Parker and Brian and I, and Brian was talking about his business and all of the things about policies and procedures and statistics and numbers and things like that I don't track well.
I'm just realizing.
What's that?
It looks like the audio is down.
Oh, do we get a note from somebody that audio's down?
No, it's working.
Oh, good.
Good. Okay, we're going to keep going.
So cross-pollination of businesses and investing time with other business professionals that have different ideas than you do. And whether that's friends or whether that's going out to specifically learn about different industries and then talk to people. Like I think a great industry to start talking to people in is real estate. I think that real estate trends really set the tone for what the rest of the country's looking at. And I think spending time talking to realtors is a really, I think a great idea for...
Man, that's striking. Okay. Because it almost seems antithetical. Like the pure artist... I'm going to play this aside for a second.
Okay.
The pure artist would say, I don't want to... The reason I don't have a cubicle or I don't work for the man or I don't whatever is mean, I want to disassociate from corporate life. But if indeed there's creativity going on in those spaces,
of course there is.
And those spaces have influence on what is possible for us. Because when you said real estate, I'm thinking about all the weddings that, especially the high-end weddings, that were financed by real estate in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And realizing, well, okay, if real estate is taking a dive, then there needs to be new resource if that same kind of level of wedding is going to continue or whatever. Paying attuned to that and coming up with creative means to overcome those obstacles or to create something new is that what you're describing?
Exactly. I think that realtors are in a similar they're in a similar space that we are in, that they're always having to look for new clients and then certainly treat their old clients well, but they're always looking for the next house that they're going to sell or the next client that they're going to sell to. So there's some similarities, but there's also some vast differences. So we can talk to business professionals in other well, okay, how else could I say that? Learning to see our business outside of. I've been doing this since '95. So I started my photography business in '95. So it's been 16 years, and during that time, it's been incredibly helpful for me to step back at times and look at what else is going on in the world. So, where was I going to go with that? I'm not sure.
Well, one of the places that you just went to was China. Like when you
traveling as far as creativity goes.
Well, here's what I'm noticing. I want to come back to what you had a second ago, but it seems like, and this is why I wanted you on the show on this topic. It seems like you always have, again, this reminds me of Michael Cooper in this, you always have this lens on of like, when I look at a new environment, I see possibilities and colors and textures and stuff that the average person doesn't seem to see. So if you're looking at real estate, you see things like that. If you're looking at your photo business, you see things like that. If you're, and it seems like you're always out collecting new artifacts, new data, new stuff that goes into your bag of tricks that then influences what you're up to. Like,
okay, possibly. I totally appreciate you saying that.
I got an example.
All right.
Okay, so you're at the DMV the other day. This is the story you told me a few months ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at the DMV.
Yeah.
And you're going to be there all day because you're helping your daughter get a driver's license. And there's some confusion about the appointment time. Right. So all of a sudden, you found yourself in a set of circumstances that probably wasn't your preference.
Right.
But what you went across the street to the liquor store and you didn't get booze. What did you get?
No, I didn't. I got a couple bottles of water and a magazine of Vanity Fair.
Vanity Fair.
Johnny Depp on it.
Johnny Depp on the cover. So in my mind, what I make up in my head is like, okay, so here's someone who I view as creative. when he's in a set of circumstances that aren't his preference, what does he do? He looks around what he's actually in, and he grabs pieces that are interesting to him, and he makes something new out of it. And so out of that day, more people.
We had lunch. My daughter and I had lunch, which was cool. We got to hang out and talk.
Which is a form of creativity. New value comes out of it. You also get to read Vanity Fair and get inspired and see cool things.
Right.
You get, again, I think I look at a guy like Johnny Depp from the outside looking in, and I think there is a professional creative everywhere that guy goes. I don't care what he's wearing, how he's acting, whether he's, Willy Wonka or he's in. Some other amazing epic. This new thing he's doing with Angelina Jolie is he's in a constant state of he sees the world
reinvents well
constantly, and I think the reason you would be drawn to that magazine with him on the cover is because that's what he does all the time. But I think that's what you do all the time.
Okay, well, it's interesting because so the analogy of the fish in the fishbowl, we can't see the water that we're swimming in.
Right.
Johnny Depp, my wife loves Johnny Depp, and I'm fascinated by him. Also, I saw him on the Actors Studio, and one of the things I remember him saying, he was asked what turns him on, and I immediately had the thought in my head, and Johnny Depp said breathing. And I was like, breathing. And then he was asked, what turns you off? And he said, not breathing. So I was like, wow, that's such an interesting answer.
Or he's a pup.
And so what he said in the magazine, too, was he said that that he's fascinated with the idea of normal people, but I'm messing it up now online, but it was something about a quote about he avoided normal. He thinks normal people are weird. That's what the quote. It wasn't exactly like that, but the gist of the quote was he finds normalcy to be weird. Yeah. He would rather be off kilter, and I can't agree with that more. I definitely have not wanted to be in that sort of. The corporate idea of having a business and looking a certain way to be in the photography industry. Even coming to, we're selecting a name for my business way back in 95. The first name for my business was Persistence of Vision. Do you know what that is?
Persistence of Vision. Yeah.
It's a film term that means the illusion of continuous motion. So it's a motion picture. So in each individual film frame is there's a gap in between it, and when it's projected rapidly, your brain fills in the information that's in the little strips to make the illusion of continuous motion. Well, nobody got that, dude. For a year, I'm handing out business cards that say Persistence of Vision, and hey, I'm a photographer. And here's my card, and they're like, what? This doesn't even make sense. It was a total disconnect. So that was like a burning failure. Now, from that, then I was like, okay, well, I wanted something sounding pretentious, and my wife was like, honey, be true to who you are. And at the time, I had Joe Photo license plates, and she goes, Joe Photo is who you are. And I was like, but that doesn't sound, flowery enough. That doesn't sound like I'd be able to work at the Ritz-Carlton. It doesn't sound like, so I had this idea of the clients that I wanted, and but I wasn't being true to myself. And once I embraced the idea that I was Joe Photo and printed business cards, had a graphic designer create a logo for me, and created my branding around sort of an alter ego. So my Joe Photo persona is not truly who I am, but it's who I want to be perceived in my business. So when you talk about creativity, I think a lot of photographers, if you have a difficult time, like being in front of other people, talking in groups, something like that, maybe create the idea of an alter ego, somebody who you are professionally, that has parts of who you truly are.
So you can still retain the integrity of who you are.
The integrity,
but
yes.
still be conscious and take responsibility for the projection you're putting out to the planet.
Well, who you want to be. If you don't have a clear idea of the direction that you want to go, then there's no way that you're going to arrive at that place. I mean, except perhaps, perchance, by some circumstance that happens that brings you into that. In which case, that's how I started shooting weddings. I didn't plan on becoming a wedding photographer. I wanted to be a rock star. I was 20 years ago. This December 31st will be my 20-year anniversary from the first wedding that I photographed.
Wow.
It was a older sister of a friend of mine, and it was a New Year's Eve wedding. It's actually the first day that I met my wife. I met Ingrid 20 years ago at the very first wedding I photographed. She was a guest. It was New Year's Eve.
Wow.
And we danced and we kissed at midnight, and we've been together for 20 years.
That's pretty awesome. Well, okay, so let me again. I'm in agreement with you, by the way, but I want to hear the other side because I know there are folks who are listening. And by the way, if you're listening and you want to participate in the conversation, and some of you guys have already asked some questions, we'll pull them up in just a second. But the way to do that is to send out a Twitter with a word @Dane Sanders in it. And if you don't follow me, that it actually
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You should. If you don't follow them, you should.
You don't need
but
to. Though,
there's a good question. Do I storyboard ideas before I shoot them? Yes, I do. Not always. I know John Michael Cooper actually does a lot. He incredibly inspires me to storyboard. I do sometimes because I learned that process in film school. And I did recently for PhotoVision. I did a Bridezilla themed shoot, like not like a crazy freaky bride, but more of a reptilian high fashion bride in the desert.
Right.
So I did storyboard that out, and it's a great thing to do.
Okay.
And I can't draw very well at all. So.
But storyboarding isn't about drawing. It's about making sure that you have compositionally and conceptually what you want to accomplish. Isn't that right?
And it can be. Yes, it can be. I do it from like the film way of you've got frames and you kind of draw, your concepts in. I see things more visually than through words. So you as an author probably see things more through words. But
yeah, but I get that. But whether or not you are you can storyboard with pictures without being an artist.
Oh yeah, you can tear pictures out of magazines. You can. I rip stuff out of magazines, and you can kind of collage it together for kind of the overall theme. If you're trying to communicate that to your clients or to the models or whomever it is.
That's great. Well, let's talk about that for a second because it actually relates to the comment before the question, which was. The idea of creating a persona or thinking in advance of what you want to project and putting it out there is kind of like a storyboarding in a lot of ways. But there's also some folks, I think, who maybe, I don't want, let me be careful about how I say this, because I think their questions are really honest, where they would say, gosh, if you're projecting a persona, then it's not really you, or somehow it's lacking in integrity, or even if you're storyboarding out what you're going to do, you're missing the spontaneity of the authentic creativity in the moment. But which I don't think is accurate. But comment a little bit about that. What would you say to the critic?
I think that's two separate issues. As pertaining to the first about if you're projecting a persona, we all project a persona. We all wear masks. So it's not like. When I created Joe Photo, I created Joe Photo because I'm actually like, you won't even believe this. People don't believe this, but I am truly introverted, and I like being by myself, and I need to have time by myself to process my thoughts in my head and to renew energy. So I figured if I'm going to be in business, and if I'm going to be in business and succeed, you have to have a network of people that you engage with. And because I was so painfully introverted through high school, through through college,
that is pretty hard to imagine.
I needed something that I could be excited about, and so creating the idea of kind of being Joe Photo, and the clothes and the earrings and the jewelry and all that stuff is not really truly who I am. Obviously, you know that that's not who we are, but it's how I want to be perceived within. It's how I wanted to stand out from what I thought was a pretty boring wedding photography place. Like when 20 years ago when I shot my first wedding, I told you I didn't want to be a wedding photographer. I wanted to be a rock star. I'm like, hey, I want to have that cool looking, I want to have that cool job, and I thought wedding photography was really lame, and 20 years ago it kind of was retarded. So it was just so posed and so structured and so it was what it was.
It wasn't very cool.
So I wanted to try to increase the level of coolness to the photography industry in Orange County, and I think Becker was certainly on board with that idea of transforming what was a very staged place at that time that we didn't fit into and we weren't embraced in, so we're like, hey, we're going to do our own thing.
Okay, so now talk about that relative to the storyboarding side of it, where if people say, like, the whole thing about our industry is
am I a pure photojournalist? No, I'm not, and I've never even claimed to be.
No, but you claim, that's what I actually love about it, is you actually claim polls. You say, well, you do have a journalistic bent, like kind of what shows up, but you're artistically influencing what's showing up, like you're thinking in advance and creatively in setting up.
I would argue that there's no pure photojournalism either.
Damn.
So that's gonna torque some people. I don't know. Who cares? We go into photographing a scene with all of our own preferences and influences, and so there's no pure photojournalism, because if for example,
it's from a bias already.
Everything is biased. So you can say, well, the viewer wasn't aware that I was there, but the image would be completely different if you were 180 degrees around that subject and you were shooting against different lighting conditions. So that would flavor the perception of the image a little bit differently than when you shot it. So I think the idea of pure photojournalism is I just don't subscribe to that thought. Though you can try to be a quiet observer, watching moments and not influencing them. But if you're there, you are influencing them. I sometimes fantasize about, like, what if I was able to go back in time and use, like, the ideas of what I have know about investing. Go back in time and buy shares of Google and buy shares of Apple and stuff like that, way back at the beginning. But I always come to the conclusion that if you went back and you at all influence it, say I put down $10,000 on Apple shares at a particular moment back in time, what today's reality would be totally different, because if I dropped $10,000 into some investment that changed the thinking of somebody in Apple that was like, well, hey, should we do this or should we do that? Well, we got an extra $10,000. You know that anything that we do, our breath, just that we're breathing here, going back to the Johnny Depp reference of breathing, getting turned on, influences the scene. So I don't know where that goes as far as the photojournalism camp. I would say as far as creativity goes, I would say one of the things that, like, you were trying to bring up about my travel trip is giving yourself permission to get outside of your comfort zone. So my wife and I and my daughter Michaela, we went to Asia for 3 weeks and just got back like a week ago. And we spent time in China, we spent time in South Korea, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam. It was insane. And Singapore was awesome. One of the things that I realized on that trip was because I had 3 weeks of really no connection with clients and with phone calls and things like that, I gave myself permission to have 3 weeks of vacation with my family. But I brought my cameras and I was shooting and I was incredibly inspired. But I began imagining my brand, Joe Photo, as a global brand. I'd never been to Asia, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, like thinking of my brand, Joe Photo, in much bigger terms, in more saleable terms. I know you and I talked about like being like a one-man show, and I've reduced my business down to a one-man show. In fact, like I've been hiding out in a cave for the last couple of years. And when you talk about like information coming in, but if you're not giving it out, I told Becca the other day I felt like kind of like the Dead Sea, like I'm taking in all this stuff, but I'm not sharing it back out in an appropriate way. So when you're not giving back out, then you begin slowly dying. And so I'm reinventing my life and my brand within the context of changing life and the changing photography industry and all that.
Well, it's funny, change is striking on a lot of levels for me, because it's one thing as if we lived in a vacuum and I'm deciding that today I'm going to be this persona, or today I'm going to go do this creative thing, and I get to kind of be the only person influencing the conditions for change. But in our current situation, when there are so many external circumstances that are affecting what is the viability of our whole industry as it currently stands, which isn't too different than what it was like even 11 or 12 years ago, when people were shifting from analog to digital, and there's a lot of folks that didn't make the shift, and as far as they're concerned, the industry just died. It just went away. When in reality, one industry died, and out of that, a new industry emerged, and without question, it seems like we are on the verge of that again. And I'm feeling this is not going to go away anytime soon. We're going to keep in this kind of mode. And I love the way you're describing this idea of this need to kind of go out and collect, but that's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Then you have to also find out a way to reinvent and send it back out again. And I just love the way that you're thinking, that you would actually take time, resource, investing in your other commitments, family and stuff, go to places like the Great Wall of China, get inspired with what you're seeing, but then also not just be inspired with what you're doing with your camera, but be inspired with what could you do with your brand. Because I know there's a lot of folks who are listening who, they might be in a rural market or a suburban market or in a non-major market in the United States or Canada or around the world, and they're sitting there thinking like, the biggest vision I have for my business, the biggest creativity thing I could go for would be if I could land 28 weddings at that hotel and this hotel and maybe get on that list. That's my big goal.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who's, had those kinds of goals, but kind of blew those out pretty quickly, and then went, well, but what else could I do? Like, I remember one conversation you and I were having. We were talking about our common friend, Mike Cologne's good, fantastic guy. We both love
Mm-hmm.
Mike. And one of the things that Mike was pretty famous for, maybe a few years ago or so, and still is, but this reaching the high-end bride.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you and I were having a conversation once, and I don't even know if you remember this, but we were talking. You had shot a couple weddings that were somehow connected to royalty in Saudi Arabia or something like that. I don't remember what exactly it was, but it was, and I remember you saying something like, yeah, I'm rethinking my brand around what would it look like for me to be, instead of reaching the high-end bride, what if it was like reaching the royal bride? Like, what if that was what I made my brand around? And I was like, who thinks that? Like, who goes in that? Or again, I point to John Michael Cooper, and like his name is Alt F Photography, which stands for Alternative Effing Photography.
Yeah.
Like, who does that? Like, if it sounds like it's going to ruin a brand, when in reality it creates this absolute set apart, creative, unique entity that you can actually build something out of. Even if it's a glorious failure, at least it's giving you kind of a new pathway to something new.
Yes, I think so many of us as creatives we just get bored doing the same thing over and over again. So I don't know, maybe, my wife, she knows that I'm ADD, and I kind of, I'll have time. I spend a lot of time journaling because I forget a lot of those things. I actually didn't shoot any royal family yet, though I talked about, I think the conversation was, I was talking about at that time, like wanting to be in Dubai. I'm like, okay, Dubai was like just, booming. Right. And I'm like, there's so much money there. But then there's also, the illusion of I sometimes forget, how hard it is to establish a business in a location. So going back to your, the analogy of somebody in the middle part of the country who maybe just like going, hey, 28 weddings at these hotels and I'll be happy. I say, good, man.
Yeah, perfect. That's a win.
Like, awesome. If you, whatever it takes for you to be happy, that's a gift and a blessing. And I know you and I were talking about, like, in the financial places, it's like where we're at, it's like, well, okay, so can you be happy in the context of making less money? Or can you be happy in the context of not shooting as much?
Right.
And it's like, if your happiness is determined by you need to be making a specific amount of money, or you need to be referred by a certain hotel or a certain wedding planner or whatever, then you're going to just be disappointed.
Yeah. Even if you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's not going to be, you may enjoy it for a moment, but then it's like, I think you and I both understand you need to look deeper. And one of the exercises that I'm so fond of, John C. Maxwell does this values cards exercise, establishing your true core values. And my two are faith and family. Mm-hmm. And for a long time I look back at how much time and energy I put into creativity and sitting behind my computer and reworking images and imagining that I was so great and so wonderful and that people loved me. And I had this fantasy of like, oh, I'm embraced in this certain way. And I realized through that period of time, I was neglecting time with my faith and with my family, the two things that I held most important to me. And so now stepping back and not blogging and not doing a lot of that stuff, I kind of feel like I'm like, well, okay, I feel like I'm able to step back, re-look at my life and reinvent. Like we were talking about the phoenix rising out of the ashes. I feel like I'm reinventing my business now. And I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like. I have an idea, and I have a lot of ideas, but like creative people, we have ideas, and then it's so hard to sometimes like make them come to fruition, which is why I'm so proud of you for your book, dude, that you had the idea and that you took the initiative to ask for help from people, and all those people came out to support you, invested in your idea, and got behind you to support you. I think so many times creatively we have an idea of what we would like to do for our business, but when we're excited about it and then we get discouraged and something happens and we don't book a wedding, we don't meet our numbers, an employee leaves or somebody rips off something from our website, or life happens and we get discouraged, and then we go, oh, that idea was stupid, and I'm at the place of really letting everybody know to take today and be kind to yourself. Like that critic in my head is constantly chattering. Like, you can't do that. You're not good enough for that. Yeah. He's prolific. So it's like,
be kind to yourself and embrace, like you said, embracing the moment. You're really practicing enjoying each moment, whether that's dialoguing with somebody face to face, whether that's writing, whether that's being with your family, whether that's being creative in your business.
Yeah. It's funny, one of the reasons why, by the way, I know there's a ton of you guys on today. It's really fun, and there's a lot of kind of great comments and things coming in. One of my favorites actually was Jen Bebb earlier in the day. I'm going to scroll down to it. And Jen, I think if you're still on, you'll hear this. But Jen just, without a question, she just said, Joe Photo Rocks is one of the nicest guys in the business and about as real as they get. Glad you have him on today. And I mean, obviously, Jen and Steve Bebb, they're pretty amazing photographers in their own right.
Awesome.
But this kind of reputation does precede you. And the reason it does is because, even just like comment a second ago, like not only are you kind to the people, but on your best days, and of course on our worst days we're all mean to ourselves, but on your best days, you're kind to yourself. You're gracious. You let yourself screw up and then reinvent or recreate or come up with something new. And I guess what I want to ask is how important. It's one thing to just say that as like a nicety, but my own bias is it's pretty critical to like living a life that you enjoy at all. But like how important is that being gracious to yourself idea to making it in this, not only in this industry but in life? Talk a little bit about that.
I think it's incredibly important because if we're understanding that, like for a really long time I had the idea like I didn't want anybody to know about any mistakes that I made. So, but now I'm really coming to realize, I'm like, oh well, now all that I've read, I'm like, the most successful people admit the mistakes that they've made, or they're at least willing to explore those ideas. So I think it's really valuable for me at this time. When I look back to 15 years ago, I had a different perception of myself, and now that since I'm beyond 40 and I'm re-examining what's really important to me, I think before, like, I was so ego-driven, like I'm like, oh, I'm great, oh, I'm gonna achieve everything that I want to achieve, and then I kind of had achieved everything that I'd wanted. By 2007, I'm like, I don't know what else I can achieve. Like, this has far exceeded all of my dreams and my expectations. And I remember my wife giving me this great piece of information after Parker and I did that program, Shooting for Your Soul, which I highly believe in the need for us to give ourselves permission to explore creatively just for our own gratification, without any client input, without any other expectations except just to please yourself. It's vitally important, and I'm really good at doing that. I give myself plenty of permission. But if you don't, and if viewers struggle with giving yourself permission to play, I would say The Artist's Way is a really great sort of therapeutic perspective on giving yourself an artist date, and at least once a week doing something just by yourself that's totally fun, and then that hopefully will blossom into something else where I do photo field trips with friends and motorcycle trips and all kinds of like travel and fun things that fuel then you're getting back to doing business. But what I was going to say is, though, now being kind to yourself. If you're struggling with that critic, you'll tend to want to hide, and if you hide, you're not going to accomplish all that you could. And so I've really been practicing the idea of living in a world of abundance rather than of scarcity. Like, there's abundance all around us, and if we take a moment to really look at all the blessings that we've been blessed with, our talents and our family and our friends and our homes and our faith and our lives, like I've been extremely blessed. And even though like business is not what I'd like it to be, even though I've been disappointed for the last couple of years and the shape that my business has taken, it's like, well, okay, that will bring me to the next reinvention, if you will. Yeah, absolutely. And the next necessary steps for me to accommodate the change that is happening in the industry. I realized also, if I'm talking too much, just let me know, but I realized that what we do as wedding photographers is totally unnecessary. In the grand scheme of history, wedding photography has only been around for, like the first wedding portraits maybe 100 years ago were done.
Right.
So now in 2011 almost, there's this great emphasis on on wedding photography, but what we do is really, it's not that important. Like, even if I shoot the best images in the world of somebody's wedding, it's like, it's not going to maybe keep that couple together. It won't keep them married. So like, great photos don't preserve, or don't keep a bad marriage going.
Yeah, it's striking you say that, because this month's I don't know which one it is. I think it's Professional Photographer has an article on Jesh de Rox, and Jesh, another friend of ours, and someone, he commanded huge dollars with his wedding photography, and he took a hiatus and kind of reinvented around the idea of beloved photography, which is exactly what you're saying. This kind of, what if photography could mean more? Meaning, if people, instead of going after the, whatever it is, 50,000 weddings that happen in a weekend in the United States, went after the billions of people that are in relationships, whether they're married or they're not, and tried to leverage what we do creatively to help bring people back together and document that. Like, would that be even more significant? Whereas de-signify the ritual, but signify the relationality of humans, and leverage our skill set in that direction. Like, in my mind, the future of photography won't fall in these kind of very, I never thought of it in like kind of the language you just described, but fall in these kind of very narrow categories that they are right now, because it's a combination of, first off, like you're saying, maybe they need to get reinvented, and maybe they're going to, whether we like it or not.
Right.
Maybe the tools that are now coming to our disposal, it's on the gens on here relative to fusion and other things, but like, we have this influx of new tools that are coming into the equation, and what if the folks that are listening, like maybe folks who are right now listening, and wouldn't it be cool if at this particular moment the spark just went off and somebody at home just went, wait a second, I don't have to play by those rules anymore. I can take these tools and use them in a totally different way and get a brand new result that no one else is doing, and even use other tools that, like, how could I integrate my camera with a coffee mug, and what else do I have, and go to Home Depot and get inspired, and like, you don't have to go to the Great Wall of China, and to just come up with something that is more meaningful for our clients and commit to delivering something creative around that. That's exciting.
Yeah, that is extremely exciting.
You've inspired me. This is awesome.
You've inspired me, brother.
Forget you people. This is awesome.
Dane has inspired me, and I told him like how I was jealous of how he presents information with deep content in it to so articulately well to other photographers. So I was just telling him how much I admired him.
You're kind. Hey, we are way over time, so I want to be sensitive here.
Yeah, I hope I don't get a ticket. If I get a ticket,
we better bust. So let's do this.
Be kind to yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves, and be gentle with your art. And I would also suggest stop looking at other photographers' websites and work, and like, give yourself a break, man. Like, maybe till the end of the year. Like, if you're an addict of like following a bunch of other people's work and looking at it and being discouraged, I would say just stop that, cut that out. Be kind to yourself. Know that you have value in what you do, and really work to develop your brand and your signature look, and affect the people in your community that you've been placed in, or whatever place that you're in. I hear so many people being discouraged, like, well, okay, the economy, and like, there's so many people that are better than me, and blah blah blah. And I would say just like, stop looking at other people's stuff for a little while. Put down magazines. Just start cross-pollinating start looking at, like you said, Joe, have you seen Ink magazine? And I know what that is, but I'm thinking like the tattoo magazine, but you're talking about like the INC. Yeah. Right. And because I look at the tattoo magazines and I dig it, because it's easy for me, and it's harder to get my brain around INC. So I resist it.
I'll leave Ink magazine my version. I'll go get Ellie and my cat on the front.
Right on.
That's fair. Hey, let's call it for today. If this was valuable to you guys, do me a favor and jump on and say hi to Joe Photo Rocks and thank him for being on. It's a significant deal for any guest that comes on. They don't get paid to do this, and it's
what?
It's a huge. That was good. That was good. I actually felt that in my heart. And also Shoot Q provides this for you guys week in and week out. I'm grateful for them and all the guests,
all the supporters.
It's been amazing, and really when I see these comments and stuff, and you're talking earlier about abundance and scarcity. That's a war for me. I believe theoretically in abundance, but half the times if you look at my life, I live in scarcity.
Dude, I'm with you. I know. It's note to self.
Yeah,
yes.
Again and again and again. And it's funny, one of my, a mentor to me in many categories is Scott Bourne, and Scott's been in my ear constantly around this idea of you don't believe your own crap. You say all this stuff in one direction, but you actually don't live it out. And I'm like, oh,
that's
screw
piercing.
up, man. But he's my friend. He's caring for me when he says it. So one of the things he challenged me to, and you guys don't have to know this doesn't matter, but he basically said, I dare you, he said it harsher than this, but he goes, basically, I dare you to not tweet about your new book. So for like several weeks up until, whatever, it's up until today. And I wrote him this morning an email privately in desperation, like, Scott, I really need to tweet. Like, the world is scarce. What I was communicating was, the world is scarce, and if I don't tweet this, no one will care, whatever. It's amazing. It's so humbling. And his response was incredibly gracious. But he basically just said, stay the course. Like, just shut up. And I can't tell you how humbling it is to go on, like, the Twitter feeds and to see the kind words and the comments. And it wasn't because I was promoting a thing or whatever. It was just this, like, no, we really are part of a very unique community of colleagues that are supportive and really do care for each other. And I can't thank you guys enough for that. It makes the work worth it. To take time out like this, it honors guys like Joe that so many of you guys would be on. I think of guys like Becker, who does so much for our industry, and on his own risk, like where he's doing it on his own with with B schools happening, and he's not alone. There's like I think of Jared Ghionis and what he's done with Ice Society. I think of so many people, individuals, and even companies. Like I'm a huge fan of White House Custom Color because of Mike Hanline, the guy who leads it. The human that leads it is just such an amazing person, and all those folks, and all the folks that aren't mentioned, I wish I had thought of them in this moment. Mike Cologne's another guy that has just been so constantly giving, constantly showing up for people, and that's what's going to make the individuals in our industry take a stand for creativity and make it through this season, and not only just make it through, but really flourish, thrive. And if you got anything out of this today, I hope it's that man, we stay the course this thing together. We're gonna be okay, but don't worry about the bumps and the circumstances. Just reinvent. I mean, it can be reinvented. Perspective changes. It certainly can. Yeah. So thanks guys for coming on. Really appreciate you guys. Again, if it was valuable, say hi to Joe. Yes. And we'll see you next week for episode 99. That's it. Right on. All right. Thanks guys. See you.